Hi, and welcome to Building Relationships in Isolation. I'm Iris Benrubi, your host, and I'm really excited to have half of the Joy Gypsies. I have Jackie Ambrow. Welcome.
Hi, Iris. I'm so pleased to be here. I'm really glad this worked out today.
Yeah, me too. We had some glitches to work out, and here we are live. And let me tell our viewers a little bit about you. You're a transformational anthropologist. I want to hear more about that. You're a certified hypnotherapist and advanced EFT practitioner, a course creator, and a musician. So tell us, what is go back to a transformational anthropologist?
Well, it's the best way I can describe an applied anthropologist, and I'll explain what an anthropologist is in a minute. But I take things from my understanding of culture and language and worldview and even medical anthropology and the understanding of human beings in a multidisciplinary way so that I can help people transform their lives and the world. So I call myself a transformational anthropologist because I'm doing more than typical applied anthropology. I'm not bringing solutions to business or manufacturing or saving a language that's dying off because the speakers are leaving the world. And there's a small group of them left. And I know people who do that, but mostly I'm working on transforming the world through individuals and small groups and teaching people what they need to know to thrive.
Good, because I want to jump right into this. So first of all, thank you for the contribution you're making to the world.
Well, thank you, Iris.
Well, my first question for you is, at this time of Corona, right now, today, we happen to be about 4 months into Corona, and people on either spectrum, there's some people that are feeling really peaceful, enjoying the shutdown, I'm going to say the lockdown, the lack of external activity. And at the other end of the spectrum, whether people are sharing a home with other people in a small space, or they're single and they're feeling lonely and isolated, they're triggered.
Yeah.
So what would you say to these people? And maybe we'll deal with each of them separately, but I'm going to get you to jump in.
You know, what most people don't know is that there are two broad ends of a spectrum of how we process our feelings and what we need and want. And if you don't mind, I'll do a nutshell version of that. This is based on 30 years of research with 25,000 clients by a clinical psychologist and hypnotherapist named Dr. John G. Kappas. And he was not published in scientific journals because that just wasn't what he wanted to do. What he did was publish for his clients and his students and lay people. So he just wanted this to get out there. He wasn't so interested in scientific accolades, let's call them. So basically, there are two ways we process emotion. On one end, and nobody's purely this or that. Everybody has some of each, but some have a preference or more of a tendency to process this way. On one end, you have people who process because their emotions are felt in their body. They can label those feelings right away, and they know what they're feeling. They can say what they're feeling, and they tend to move through their feelings fairly quickly. These people generally, but not always, tend to need a lot of contact touching. And so these are the folks who are going to have the most difficult time being isolated without human contact, without physical contact. And the phone and the Zoom just won't cut it for them too easily because they don't feel like you're getting them. They don't feel like they're being understood and making themselves clear unless they can touch you. So that's one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, you have people who don't necessarily feel their feelings in their body right away. It's more diffuse. It's usually through the mind that they start to realize, oh, maybe I've got an emotion about this. And it only trickles down into the awareness. There's a delayed response. They're a little more cut off from the physiological feeling and more in their heads because they tend to process things more through the intellect, through the mind. Now, the interesting thing is that the person who is on the end of the spectrum, who feels the feeling in their body right away, we'll call them a P, okay? And those folks do feel their emotions and know what they are right away. And they are using their body to communicate with the world, to experience the world. And they tend to use their body to protect their heart and to protect their feelings, to protect against rejection, because the biggest thing they're after is acceptance. Now, the other side, we'll call them E's, the people who use their intellect more. They're exploring the world with their mind more, and they have a tendency to use the intellect to defend their heart and their body. So they need space around themselves. They need time to pursue their career, their hobbies, their thoughts. And they tend to have a cycle where they're more receptive for touch, but they're not receptive for touch all the time. And this happens with men and women, Dr. Kappas found. And it's not just the introverts or the extroverts, although E's tend to be more of an introvert, meaning they recharge their batteries alone, and P's tend to be more extroverted, and they recharge their batteries being around people. So the E, because their feelings are kind of diffuse and they're not as aware of them right away, there's a delayed response. It takes an E longer to process an emotion, and it takes an E even longer than a P to let go of it if they can. So there isn't a wrong way of processing emotion. Kappas found out that there were about half and half in the population that are E's and half are P's, and maybe 5% in the middle are both. They're 50-50. They're very balanced. All human beings have the ability to act more like an E and or act more like a P. In other words, they can act a little more like their opposite when they're in a relationship that draws that out of them. So it's interesting because opposites attract. And I know, Iris, that you're into being a love coach. You really do focus on helping people find and keep their love relationships alive. So this is very valuable information because it's about how opposites attract, and it's complementarity.
Yeah, yes. I want to really talk about what does that mean when it gets drawn out of them in a partnership?
When two people are brought together, they're attracted to something in the other person, and it starts with their energy, and it starts with a subconscious attraction. And that subconscious attraction has to do with, that person, say I'm an E, and I'm at a party and I'm looking across the room at this vivacious, outgoing person who's touching everyone and very comfortable in their skin, and I admire that. And I kind of wish I could be a little more like that, because I feel a little awkward in this party because I'm kind of protecting my body more, and I use my head to protect my body and my heart, and I'm not as open and I don't feel as free. And I look at that person and go, ooh, isn't that cool? Isn't that nice? I'd like to be more like that. And the other person, that P out there in the room, who's the life of the party, is looking back at that E going, ooh, I wish I wasn't as, I wish I didn't need people so much. I wish I wasn't quite so needy, and I wish I had more calm and self-control. Look how self-possessed that person is over there. They're really in a sense of control of themselves, a sense of calm, and they don't seem to need people like I do. I wish I had more of that. And so the two people might be attracted to each other, and then when they are, that E may chase after the P, But when they get into a relationship that lasts for a while, the E goes back to being an E, a little more, in their cycle days. Some days they don't want to be touched, and other days they're more receptive, and they're more focused on their career and their mind's life, and the relationship takes a back seat because it is not their top priority while they're in their career and their hobbies and the things that they're doing with their minds, and they're physically only feeling receptive every few days. So that puts the P in the position of, oh my gosh, they used to be so into me. They're not into me. And today they don't even want me to hug them or touch them. And there's something terribly wrong here. The P doesn't understand that the E has cycle days, and the P feels rejected. And then they go into this taking for granted stage. The E takes the P for granted. The P is feeling like they're being rejected, and they then get into trauma. So that sort of teases a little bit more about what this all means. But go ahead, Iris. I can see you have a question.
Yeah, and it was more a comment in those things that attract us at first are the things that make us crazy later.
Right. And
when we don't know how to deal with it.
That's right. And Kappas figured this out in his behavioral model that really kind of bucked the system of behavior back in the day when he was developing this, because it used to be that many counselors and therapists were Ps, and they knew what they felt it right away, and they processed it right away, and they were able to let it go. And they thought that the Es, who were often the clients, that their people would come in and say, oh, I'm really upset with my partner because they don't love me anymore the way they used to, and all of that. And the Ps would say, well, there's something wrong with the E. There's something wrong with not knowing what you feel and not being able to say it, label it, process it, and release it soon enough. And that caused a lot of friction, so that the E would get blamed. I'm sorry. The E would get blamed for the relationship problems. And the P, all they wanted was just to have their love back. And the E just wants some space so they can do what they do, which is what drew them together in the first place, when there was this admiration and attraction for the differences. So yeah, there's a complementarity though, because the E really enjoys having the P around, and the P loves having the attention of the E when they can get it. And when people begin to understand there's this subconscious relationship behavior going on, they can learn how to manage it.
Yeah, and I think you're saying that the first step is not to take it personally.
Right. That's right. Because we're all on the spectrum somewhere, and there isn't a wrong way to process emotion, and there isn't a wrong way to express closeness and togetherness. And it ebbs and flows with a rhythm that is normal.
And not normal for yourself and the couple that you're in. You get to create your own normals, what you're saying.
Well, yeah, paying attention to the natural cycle that the E has, because if the physical knows, that's the full word for the P word. I'm trying to keep it simple, but if the P knows that the E is going to be receptive on certain days, they can plan ahead for that. And they can let the E chase them a little bit, because when the E has to chase after the physical, when the P plays a little hard to get, and it doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman, if the P plays a little hard to get and makes the E work for it a little bit on those days that they are receptive, it brings out more of a P, what we could call subdominant nature in the E. And the E gets to exercise that part of them that is more P-like, that they so admired in their P when they were first attracted to them and wanted to be more like them. Now they get to actually exercise that part and bring it out and let it play and have that part of them be more like a P. And the P can benefit from being a little more like the E, and to relax on those off days that the P doesn't want to be touched, knowing they will cycle back around, knowing that all they have to do is give their E what Cap is called a Twinkie, you know, that hostess that hostess cake that has the yellow outside and the cream filling that used to be so popular. Well, Cap has called it giving a Twinkie. Give your partner what they need, what they're starving for, so that you don't get into more problems, he used to say. So for the E, what the E needs, oftentimes, especially if their career is going badly or their financial concerns are there, give them space, give them time to work things out with their mind and with what they're doing for their accomplishments. And for the P, give them affection, give them one of the 5 love languages that Gary Chapman writes about. Give them something that they crave and need, and usually it's closeness. Time together, could be sex, it could be love notes, it could be gifts, praise, admiration, and the E needs to learn to give those things to the P. And then the E needs to give space to the E, and then trust that the cycle will keep coming back around, where the E will be receptive and want to have that relationship, the closeness that the P is craving. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that where couples often get into a problem is they feel like, great, I'm stuck with this for the rest of my life.
Yes, that's right, because they don't know that there's this subconscious pattern playing out, and they don't know what to do with it. See, what Kappas did was he figured out that if you can understand, predict the behavior, if you can understand it and predict it, then you can also manage it. You can navigate it much more gracefully. So if you know, if you're a P and you know that your E is on an off day in their cycle, that they don't want to be touched that day, give them space. Knowing that they're going to come around and start to chase after you again at some point, you know, and make it so they want to chase you. Make it so that they see, ooh, there's something I want there. I remember this. I remember I want that. And the P can usually be the one to manage the relationship on that level more. But E's can do it too. I've had a number of clients, mostly women, who were E's, who had a very high P husband or spouse who they just didn't know what to do with, because the P would want sex and want their attention a lot. And the E's just trying to juggle all the jobs and responsibilities as a wife and a mother and a career person. And they didn't feel like interacting on a lot of days, especially if they were being nagged about having more physical closeness or spending more time together. So once they learned about their own cycles and they started to manage that differently with their P, their relationships improved. I've had a number of people who were on the verge of divorce. One of them would come to me and we would do this work together. And I just talked with a former client of mine just a few days ago, because it was her birthday, and she does taxes. I had tax questions, and she was telling me how after the work we did, she ended up not getting divorced, and they've been together now for some time, few years. And she said he knows he's on notice about certain things, but it's gone so much better, and they're happy. So
yeah, that really speaks to something that I teach, whether couples or people one-on-one, is that, you know, we often think that conflict is a recipe for creating a wedge between two people. And at one level, if you don't have the strategies, yeah, it puts a wedge and you feel like you're on the brink of divorce. But when you learn the strategies, and what you're talking about is negotiating, right? No, it's not a win lose. When you have those strategies, you get to create a closer, more emotionally intimate relationship.
Right. And some of it really is that relationships are all about agreements. And we have so many unspoken agreements. Expectations often are subconscious. And when we start to look at those, we can approach the relationship differently and communicate about what expectations we have and create new agreements. That's a lot of the work that I do to help people have the skills to negotiate new agreements and ask for what they want and need in a way that doesn't engage in further damage. So one of the things that we talked about when you invited me on was to say, well, if you want to give a gift to our community, you can. So the gift I'm giving to the community is a little package called the 5 Freedoms and Change Model. And so there'll be a recording in there that's very relaxing to help people learn how to use and integrate the 5 Freedoms and the Change Model. And then there's some handouts on the 5 Freedoms and the Change Model, and 3 rules for communication, especially when you can't remember all the steps of the change model. There are 5, and so in the 3 rules of communication, there's just 3. It's easier. And then the other thing is a little handout on tools for dealing with feelings, because as we've been talking about, how we manage our emotions, how we manage our feelings is really key to whether we're going to thrive or not in this pandemic. So the people who are at home trying to deal with other people in their household, and feelings come up about too much togetherness, not enough privacy, or too many demands emotionally, or not getting your needs met even though the person's right there. That's one side of the feelings that can come up. And the other feelings that can come up are those who are in isolation, and they have grief and they have loss, and all kinds of feelings come up about what's happened in the past, because we have time to ruminate about things, and feelings come up. But as you know, Iris, all of this is about the opportunity to acknowledge, heal, and release the things that come up. In other words, nothing comes up that we aren't ready to acknowledge, heal, and release. So that's a lot of the work that I do, is helping people find their way through, giving them tools for practical forgiveness of ourselves and others, how to step out of judgment into discernment and act from that inner guidance. These are the things that I like to teach. So the people who are at home watching this, I'd like you to know that you can learn all these things. They're not taught in school. That we are not taught how to deal with our feelings and how to communicate in our relationships to negotiate for what we want, not in any real way, because we tend, in this culture, we leave it up to the family and the school to try to do it on the fly. We don't teach it in a systematic way. I'm sorry about my cough. So what I did was, after a dozen years of working with clients, I identified the things I was teaching over and over again. The same sets of skills and practices and mindset that people need to be successful in their relationships. And then that's how we created this course, Relationships for Conscious Living.
Good. So do you have, now that we've teased everyone on the call, do you have the link where they can find it? And we'll put it when we edit the video.
Yes. I sent the link. I have to exit here for a second and
You sent us the link?
I did send it through email, and but it's kind of long because I didn't do a bit.ly with it. Copy the link. Text. See, I made a new thing. I wonder if that page is going to do what I wanted it to do. Hold on a second. Don't you love doing things live with people who get on their computer to do stuff? Okay. Well, it's a different link for this. Okay. So yeah, so I'll send you this in the email, but here's, I'm going to just read it off.
Actually, can you put it in the chat? Because anybody who's on live,
they can.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I am going to do that. Let me get back to Zoom and go to the chat. And this is where you can get your free gifts and sign up for getting emails from us. And so you'll get the 5 freedoms and the change model with the recording, the handouts, tools for dealing with feelings, all of that in a compressed file. It'll be a download folder that is compressed, and then you could just open it up and it'll all be there. So that link will get that for you. So we are creating a membership community too, where people would be able to do live work through Zoom with us. And yeah.
Great. So they'll be able to get in contact with you through this link?
That's right.
Beautiful. I do have one more question for you, and I think it's really important. We've talked a lot about the people that are in the relationship, that are sharing space or sharing time, depending on where they are in the world and how much they can be in physical non-distancing. But what about the people that are watching, that are single, that are feeling lonely, that are more the P's and need that touch, that connection? They're really feeling it right now, that are feeling the losses. How would you suggest that they manage those emotions that are coming up for them that are real?
Well, first off, I would suggest spending time in meditation and doing things that physically feel good to you. Like, for example, using your body, going for a walk. If you have to wear a mask, then go, wear a mask. But be out in nature. Go out to the ground that's outside and just be there to soak up the feelings from nature around you. For example, you can also take time to do a little self-massage, do Qigong, and YouTube has so many classes. I practice Qigong watching YouTube. I have certain favorites that I watch, and then I do the Qigong while I'm watching it. I'm a massage therapist from many years ago. I don't practice now with paying clients or anything, because I let that lapse years ago. I find that what I'm doing is so effective that I'm focusing on my current skills. But years ago, I was a massage therapist in private practice, and teaching people to do self-massage can actually really help with that need for touch. And you can do it so simply. I mean, if you just were to, I'm going to take my glasses off, but even if all you do is take your fingertips and you gently pull really lightly on your skin, and you maybe do over your eyebrows, just pulling them apart gently. And then you take 2 or 3 fingers and you put them on the bridge of your nose and below your eyes, gently pull, not hard, on your cheeks. And even if all you do is touch your face and notice how your face feels, and you can gently, slowly bring down your hands up through your nose and your cheeks. In Qigong, there's this petting the kitty move we do. And that is another thing to do. There's a whole movement called yin massage, where you bring your hands behind your head and neck, and you go around your neck, and then you pet your throat like a kitty, and you do this whole thing. You can find this online on YouTube, and do some of those movements, because you can get some of your needs for touch simply by touching yourself. Now, if you have pets, pets provide some of our need for touch too. And they love to be petted most of the time. And so petting a pet is another way to do it. The other thing you can do is you can use the right use of your imagination. And you can use your imagination to go back to remember the times when you have been hugged, you have been kissed, you have been touched, you have had that physical closeness. And what might come up is you might feel sad, you might feel grief that you don't have that right now. That could happen, but it's healing to allow yourself to feel the feelings instead of stuffing them. If you feel the feelings, then you can allow yourself to move through them instead of staying stuck in them. Now, there's one thing I want to do to add to that. When you have these feelings come up, they often come up because of the way we're thinking about something, about what is, okay? And if we have sadness or grief over loss, and loss can be right now too. Think about it this way. There's a Venn diagram. I'm going to make 2 circles with my hands, and they overlap. So this is a circle, and this is a circle, and they're overlapping. And let's say that this circle represents what is, the facts. The fact is we have a pandemic. We're in isolation, we're in quarantine. And the other circle is what is my story about it. This circle is my interpretation of what's happened in the past, or what's happening now, or what might happen in the future. In the place where the overlap, right here in the center, then a thought we have, a story we have, is suddenly included in the facts, in the what is. And that placed in the center, if we get our story stuck in there and don't realize it's a story, it's an interpretation, that's where we get stuck, because we think our story is true. And our story about how we feel and why we feel what we feel and what people have done or haven't done or what's possible for us, those stories can empower us or they can disempower us. And we don't need to change the stories that are empowering, but we need to remember that the stories that we have created that disempower us are stories we wrote. You see, if I wrote the story, I could change it. And if you wrote the story, you could change your story. And it doesn't have to be like all glitzy and glamorous and a fantasy. Well, it could be. It can be just a little bit better version of what happened. For example, if I say, I'm alone now, and I say to myself, I'll always be alone. That's a disempowering story. Even though the fact is I'm alone. I'm not really, because I have my daughter, but and others. But in any case, if I say I'm alone now and I'm never going to have contact with anyone again, or it's going to be years, and I can't have my needs met, then that story is disempowering. But I could create a more empowering story and say, I'm alone now, and I'm in a pause. I'm taking, I'm on a reset, pause. I'm at a time in my life when I get time for me, time to review what I want, what I need, and what I feel now points me to what I want and need. What I feel now is telling me where to look. Where my feelings are is where my attention needs to go long enough for me to notice what's actually been happening with me, so that I can find out what I value. And the things that I used to value may not be what brings me joy. The things that I used to value might have been things that covered up pain or filled me up so that I didn't have to look at what I'm really feeling or what I really want or what I really need, because I've been afraid to ask for what I want and need. So this is the time to look at those triggers and realize that even anxiety over the pandemic is pointing us to be prepared because anxiety is a preparatory kind of feeling. It tells us what we need to prepare for and do to meet an uncertain future. Okay. It's also possible to toggle out of anxiety into relaxation, and that's something that I teach. And it's also possible to stop new anxieties from forming simply due to poor diet, which is something else I teach. Cap has figured that out too. It was very amazing how he pulled this together. I'm so sorry about my cough, but okay. I have allergies and it's just what it is.
You know what? A lot of what you share today is about giving our listeners power. giving them an opportunity to create something new for themselves, whether it's a new story, a renegotiation of unconscious expectations in relationship, the ability to self-soothe with the touch. And so my last question to you, Jackie, is if there was one thing you would hope our viewers take away from today, what would that be?
I would say, please use this time to transform your world. In other words, it's time to rethink, reimagine, recreate, revise the world we want to live in, because we're seeing cracks in our systems. We're seeing things that don't work. We're seeing things even in our relationships when we do get to talk with people that don't work. And so let's look at that and figure out what it is that we do want. What do we need? What is it that's not been getting done? Or what is it that we don't have in our lives right now that we want in the future? And what can we do to bring that in now? My daughter is a P, I'm an E, so I'm handling the quarantine better than she is, but she's caring for a lady who is high risk. And so she doesn't dare go out and mix and mingle with a lot of other young people for fear of bringing the virus back to this lady, and it could kill her. Okay, so the challenge for her and other young people is to figure out how can you get your needs met under the current conditions. And it is possible, but it's going to take ingenuity. And that's why I'm talking about the right use of imagination. Rather than use your imagination to imagine the worst possible calamitous result of all of this, and to imagine that you'll be alone and untouched forever. Use your imagination to imagine the world you wish to see, the world you wish to experience. And then use your imagination right here, right now to figure out, well, how can I get my needs met? Instead of the question of, well, it's not even a question of just thinking that nothing's possible because of the pandemic. Start asking yourself in the universe, how can I? How can I? That simple mind shift of asking the question, how can I? Or how can we? Then we start the juices flowing for our creativity, our ingenuity.
Ingrid, we've got a comment from one of our viewers who said, thank you, this has been valuable information for me. And with that, Jackie, I want to say thank you so much for the time that you've shared with us today, for these really practical strategies that people can start to use right now in their lives to really change the emotional experience of what they're going through, for this really valuable and wonderful gift that you've offered our viewers, and for the difference you make in the world.
You're very welcome. I highly recommend you all look up Carla McLaren. I'm going to put her in the chat. She did a podcast on Sounds True that I loved listening to. She has the Grand Unified Theory of Emotion, and she's written a couple of books, and there'll be more out, but she talks about how to use your feelings to guide you, and that they're your friends. They are part of our cognition. So thank you so much, Iris. It's been great. I hope you'll come on Joy Gypsies TV, our YouTube channel, and let us interview you sometime in the near future.
Thank you. I'd love to do that. Thank you for your contribution again.
Thank you, Iris.
Bye, everyone.
You take care. Stay safe, stay well.
Yes, you too.
Bye.